guys, today we're taking a look at the Polaroid Highlander Model 80, and we're also going to take a look at the wink light. That'll be later in the video if you want to skip forward or go to that part, but we'll get to the wink light later. This Polaroid Model 80 cost me $22. When they were new, they were $66.95. Its value on eBay is about $22. This one is in good condition. The only personal significance to this is I have a Model 95, and this Model 80 is basically the little baby brother of the 95. The 95 weighs over 4 pounds. This one is, well, much less and much smaller. But before we get into the Model 80, we need a bit of Polaroid history. Over the span of over 60 years, Polaroid made basically 3 types of cameras. This type of camera, the roll film cameras, were made from 1948 to 1963. Next became the series of pack film cameras, which made it simpler for the user, and that went from 1963 to 1972. And then at the end, they finally switched to integrated or integral film cameras, which were from 1972 to 2008. And the integral film cameras are the ones that are basically like the SX70s. The Model 95 was the first one made. That's the big brother to this one. That was 1948. This one, the Model 80, came out in 1954. The film hasn't been available for many years. There are some ways to modify your cameras to take 120 roll film, but frankly, it's not advised. Now the Model 95, the big brother, takes type 42 and 47 film, and those are 400 speed and 3000 speed ASAs. And the Model 80, this smaller one, takes type 32 and type 37, and again, those are 400 ASA and 3000 ASA film speed. The historical significance of this camera was they made 1,750,000 total Model 80s sold. Now there were 3 kinds of Model 80s. This original Model 80, which uses an LV scale, light value scale, to set the exposure. The Model 80A switched to a EV scale, an exposure value scale, to set the exposure. And again, the light meters would just make that easy for you. And finally, the Model B, the only difference was they updated the film cutter on the side, which is probably a good thing, because if you look at any YouTube videos of people trying to use these cameras, the film does not really cut very well on the end. Here's a fun fact. Following the bankruptcy of Polaroid, the new owners, PLR IP Holdings, on January 5th of 2010, Polaroid appointed Lady Gaga as the creative director for the company. So the features of this camera were the smaller photos than the 95. This one takes 2.5 by 3.25, but the 95, which was bigger, took 3.25 by 4.25 pictures. So it's smaller film. In fact, the width of the film is basically 120 roll film size. This one is made out of gray metal and plastic. It has a 100mm f8.8 lens and a 2-speed shutter, 1/25th of a second or 1/100th of a second, plus there's a bulb setting. And there's M-Sync for wink flash, and the focal distance is from infinity to 3.5 feet. Now if we look at the top of the camera, the only thing up there is the hot shoe for the wink light and the camera lug strap. If we look at the front of the camera, I'll fold this up. We have the viewfinder. Interestingly enough, we have a 1/4-20 tripod socket on the front of the camera. This is the flip-out stand to hold it, so when you're setting it vertically, you can rest it without it tipping over. And then this is the button to open the lens. Now, if I flip this up, that will fold down and hold the camera up, but also underneath the flip-out thing, that's where the serial number is. So if I open this lens up like that, you can see where this flip-out thing can hold it upright correctly. This is the dial to select the light value. The light values go from 9 to 4. I'm sorry, 9 to 2. And it's interesting when you turn these. I'll try and get closer if I can, but right now it's set at 5. Let me get it to 9. That's a setting at 9, and if you could look in the lens, you'll see a very tiny f-stop opening. And when you go to 8, which is this way, the f-stop gets a little bigger. And when you go to exposure value 7, the f-stop gets even bigger. When you go to exposure value 6, it's even bigger. 5, it's even bigger yet. And finally, at exposure value 4, the hole in the diaphragm here is at the largest opening for the largest f-stop. Now, that's at setting 4. We still have 3 and 2 left, so when you go to setting 3, the f-stop window actually gets smaller, and then at exposure value 2, it's the wide open aperture again. So what you're seeing here is from exposure value 3 and 2, that's when it switches the shutter speed. So the shutter speeds, remember there's only 2 speeds, 1/25th and 1/100th. Now this lever on the left is the shutter release, but it's also what cocks the shutter. So if we press it, it fires the shutter and cocks it. It's all one motion. And right now this little dial indicator is pointed to I for instant. If we turn it to the B setting, that's the bulb setting. So now when you click it, the shutter stays open until you release it. I'll put it back to I. Now the lens has a dial on it for setting the focal length. There's no rangefinder in this model of the camera, nor was there in the original 95. So you have to focus by distance. And the distance scale goes from just past 3.5 feet all the way to infinity. And there's this clever stop at the top and a pin that stops you when you get to either limit. So you have to focus by distance. And in fact, they call that, instead of the focus ring, they call it the focus turret. Now to fold this up, you just push down on either of these chrome sides. There's a little indent here right there where your thumbs should probably go. And if you push in there, it'll collapse, snap it shut. We can close the little foot, which also includes your secret serial number. And that's the front of the camera. Now on the right side of the camera, there's just a hinge for the door. And on the left side of the camera, there's a door release lever, that's this thing here, and a film cutter, and a slider to unlock and lock the film door. On the camera bottom, we just have this the camera strap lug, and the other one is on the top. Then the camera back is where things get interesting. This little button opens the access door to peel your exposed film off. Normally, when you load it and when you're done with it, this door stays shut, and you only open it to peel off your paper print. And if you push this, it'll flip open, and that's where your print would be, and you would peel it off, and it would be already developed. You let it develop in the camera. Typically, it's 60 seconds. Longer doesn't hurt. Shaking it doesn't help. So let me close this, and we'll show you how to load it. Now, I don't have a roll of film. If you YouTube enough, you'll see other people loading these cameras. And trust me, if you bought a roll of film, it's been expired by about 50 years. Typically, all you'll get out of them is a dry white picture where it doesn't do anything. So again, to open the back, you push this little lever slightly to the side that way and up, and that unlocks it. And then you have to also push this to the unlock position, which is that way, and then the back will open. Now this side opens up this way. I don't even have room here in my video for both sides. And the film comes in this really complex shape where there's actually two rolls in it. This little stubby here thing here is where the negative roll goes. So you pop the positive roll over here and it goes across, and pull it into this one, and then you just close it all up, and it's magic after that. And again, to close it, you just squeeze it shut and you can lock it, and that's snapped automatically. So now the film supposedly is loaded. Then you would pull out a little piece, and to pull it out you have to release this film cutter, pull the film out. It should stop automatically, then snap it shut again and rip it off. Now you're ready to take your first exposure. Now the interesting thing is there's nothing on this camera that stops you from taking double exposures, and double exposures work pretty good on a Polaroid. So you would just open the thing, focus by distance, push the shutter button. That would be your first exposure. It's been exposed. It's not developing until you take some action on your part. So after you've taken your picture, or in the case of if you wanted to do a double exposure or triple exposure, after you've taken all of those two or three pictures, then you finally release this lever again so that the film cutter is not engaged. You pull it out till it stops, snap this shut so that it's supposed to cut the film, and rip it off. And trust me, in the newer models, they have a sharper edge and a better film cutter than the original models. If you look on YouTube videos, you'll see people, when they rip it off, it just kind of shreds the paper. It's not a nice clean cut at all. Then you wait your 60 seconds. Now that it's went over the rollers, it's busted the little packs of liquid chemicals inside, and at 60 seconds later, your film should be developed in here. You open the door, peel off your picture, and then you close it, unlock this thing, and rip it off to the next section, and that's your disposable garbage. Now, Polaroid makes a lot of waste, and they're not really recyclable. And after you've got your film out, then there's a little tube container that you take a little cotton or a little like foam thing that's got chemical in it, and you smear it on your picture to coat the film. It's not stop bath, it's just a protective, I suppose, for UV light. Now let's talk about the wink light. I bought this wink light years ago, and I actually was hoping to put it on my Polaroid 95, and the 95 takes a different model wink light. Back in the 1950s, when it came to camera flash, photographers had their choice of flash bulbs or electronic flash guns. And of course, electronic flash guns are expensive, and flash bulbs are expensive too. So because they had 3,000 speed ASA film for the Polaroids, now they could take pictures with a flash, but it didn't have to be as powerful as an electronic flash, and it didn't have to be as expensive as a flash bulb. So these wink lights take an ever-ready number 450 battery, a 45 volt photographic flash battery, and it charges a capacitor, and when the shutters trip, the capacitor is discharged, and the bulb inside is actually a 12 volt automotive turn signal lamp, and it gives a brief flash. Now the turn signal lamp is only rated for 12 volts, but what happens is the duration is so small that they tend to last a long time. And in fact, when you bought the Polaroid 45 volt battery, it came with a bulb. So there was no real concern there. Now, if it's not bright enough after you take that picture, you can add a real flash bulb attachment to the wink light, and it just plugs into the top like that. So we get back to our camera, and the wink light just goes into the hot shoe. I want to say easy peasy. And there we have a Polaroid ready to take pictures with a wink light. Now, one of the neat things about the wink light, especially if you add this thing to get more light, is you can do bounce flash because this thing pivots. So you can pivot it up and take a picture and bounce it off the ceiling, aim it slightly forward if you want. It's a clever little arrangement. Let me close this up. And we'll pop this off. Now these are AG1 flash bulbs, and at the time these were the smallest and the least expensive flash bulb made. And this little white plastic lever is the ejection button for the flash bulb. Pops it right off. They easily snap in, and they're kind of neat because the prongs go in two different directions, so there's no wrong way to put it in. You just stick it in the slot, push hard, and it snaps right in, and it stays locked in. Now, on the bottom of this wink light, this shows that this is a model 250. So this mounts on the Polaroid cameras like this one that have a fairly standard looking hot shoe. Not as standard, I'm sure, as a Canon or a Nikon, but standard enough that it looks pretty much normal. Now, my older model 95 had a wedge-shaped arrangement, so it took a model 252 wink light, which has this strange wedge shape to it to go into the hot shoe. So now, let me pull this off, and I'm going to take this apart for the first time ever. There will be a short delay while I go to the screwdriver. So it says right here on the plastic to open, loosen the screw 5 turns. So let's try that. And that was 5 turns. And now we're coming apart, probably for the first time ever. And here's my ever-ready 450 45-volt battery, which still has good contacts. Now you gotta love these old batteries. I don't know what their technology was, but they don't seem to corrode and ruin your products. And again, there's instructions here. Replace the fresh battery, ever-ready 460. Make sure the battery terminals touch the contacts, close the cover, and there's the capacitor. And here's the automotive battery, or I'm sorry, the automotive turn signal light bulb that would also come with your battery pack. So I'm going to put this back together. I'm not sure where this guy was. It's making good contact. I'll just hide that in there. Hopefully that's good enough. I'm trying to figure out how this screw works. So this hole here is going to catch into this slot here when we tighten the screw down. And sure enough, 5 turns in, it's tight, and it's all back together, and I didn't break it. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video.